You are Locked On Blue Devils, your daily podcast on the Duke Blue Devils. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody. Welcome into another episode of the Locked On Blue Devils podcast. My name is JJ Jackson. So great to have you here with us today on Wednesday, May 14th, 2025. Locked On Blue Devils is your one-stop shop where we discuss everything going on inside the life of Duke athletics. I've been doing this for 4 years now with the Locked On Podcast Network and so excited each and every day that I get to bring you all of the news surrounding our favorite Duke Blue Devil teams. On today's show, we're going to take a look at the year that Khaman Maluach was able to put together for the Blue Devils on the basketball court. At the end of our program, we'll talk about the latest involving Cedric Coward and his stay or go decision that looms pretty large with Duke basketball. And who better to have on the show with us than our good friend Kevin Connelly, who's the site expert from Ball Durham and kind enough to join us here on the program today. If you haven't done so already, please be sure to follow and subscribe to Locked On Blue Devils for free wherever it is that you get your podcast. Leave us a 5-star rating and written review. Also, you can watch our show each and every day on YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, like these videos, share it with your friends, as we're continuing to put out great content each and every day all the way through the off season. So without further ado, let's bring him on into the program. The aforementioned Kevin Connelly is here with us today. Good to see you once again, Kev, and excited to continue our player review series here. How are you?
I'm good, JJ. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, man. Well, let's get after it. Let's talk about man, the big man in the middle. Khaman Maluach and the season that he just had for Duke basketball, the latest or the last addition, I should say, to the freshman class for the Blue Devils, joining the squad. And if we take a look at that storyline alone, he was really late, kind of in the radar. It was a year ago in the middle of the season that he's showing up to a game. I believe it was January or so that he makes his visit. And then we hear that he's going to be coming to play for Duke basketball. What do you remember from the earliest kind of emergence of him as a recruit for Duke?
Well, it was a lot of unknown, right? I mean, you're hearing of this 7'2", I don't want to call him a high school prospect, but international prospect, certainly, that is thinking about Duke. And he's originally in the class of 2026. And there's really not that much known about him. I mean, all of a sudden, once you hear more and more, at the time, he was projected, or once he reclassifies, he's projected as a top 5 to top 10 pick in the NBA draft. And you're like, okay, like this guy has some serious potential to him. And then, Duke and I think UCLA and maybe Kentucky were involved with him. And he ends up coming to Duke. And then you really start to dive into him a little bit more because playing in the NBA Africa Academy and some of these other leagues that he was playing in, coming from South Sudan, you don't really know a whole lot about him. And then you keep diving in. And then all of a sudden you get to the summer and he's out there playing on the South Sudan Olympic team. So
that was crazy.
It was a quick rise to the top of figuring out who Khaman Maluach was and what he was like as a basketball player.
And kind of in there, Kevin, all along the way, we learned of being linked to Luol Deng and the Duke ties that were there previously, right? Luol Deng now running things for South Sudan basketball at the FIBA level, obviously had the great season playing for Duke before he started a very long and successful NBA career in his own right. And when you look at that connection, I think that had to speak wonders into getting Maluach on campus and to getting him to ultimately commit to play for Duke basketball. It's always good, man, when you can have prior relationships. Mike Krzyzewski has had this brand built for a long, long time. Jon Scheyer here obviously building off of that as well. And those connections clearly go a really long way in the recruiting world.
Well, yeah, 100%. When his top advisor is a Duke guy, you'd have to imagine Duke had the inside track, and they did, and they got him, and he put together a really nice freshman season.
At the next level, Khaman Maluach is going to be represented, it looks like, by Josh Hairston, another Duke guy. So love seeing the brotherhood ties running deep. Really excited to see what he's able to do at the next level. So let's talk about the season that man was able to put together. As we kind of dive into the numbers a little bit, what stood out to you about his game?
Well, it's interesting, right? Because you look at that last game against Houston and he plays 21 minutes and he's 7'2" and he had 0 rebounds. And I think one thing that honestly sticks out a little bit is that he only averaged 6.6 rebounds per game. And now, yes, he wasn't always out on the court for 30 to 35 minutes per game. He averaged just over 20 minutes per game. But honestly, I think that's the first number that sticks out, especially for a 7'2" guy. You think, even though you're only playing 21 minutes or so per game, that you're going to be pulling down more than just under 7 rebounds a game.
Yeah, no, when you look at his size, it would have felt like there'd be more opportunities there for him to grab the big boards and to make the big time plays for Duke there. But obviously that was a tough end to the year. We're going to do our best not to have that kind of define the season that we had, although it's so easy to when your last images are Maluach being unsuccessful in that Final Four loss that Duke had at Houston. Offensively, his career high was 19 points on the season for the Blue Devils. That was a game that they played against Notre Dame, the game in which Cooper Flagg set the ACC freshman scoring record with 42 points. It was a 19.10 rebound game versus Notre Dame. He lived above the rim. Maluach finished with 81 dunks on the season. That was one of the clips we saw early in the preseason from head coach Jon Scheyer yelling at his guards and playmakers to throw the ball up to the rim and let the big fella go get it.
Well, yeah, and I think that's what made him successful. And we talked about this with a number of players. Like, his job wasn't necessarily to score the basketball. I mean, you had guys who were going to get the bulk of the shots in Cooper Flagg and Con Knipple primarily. So Khaman Maluach almost there as a security blanket down low. And I think he did a really good job at that. And I think the one thing we probably would have liked to see a little bit more was the three-point shot. We saw it a little bit in the preseason and in his run-up to the Olympics. He did take 16 of them with Duke. And, I mean, I'm not going to say I wanted to see him shoot 50-plus three-pointers, but going 4 of 16, he had some of the outside game, and he continued to work on it. I think if Duke was maybe able to space the floor a little bit more, let him showcase what he could do from three-point range, that would have been a little bit cool to see. But certainly when you're getting a 7'2" guy and he shoots 71% from the field overall, you'll take that every time.
Yeah, really glad you brought that up, man. Those numbers again, 71% from the floor, 25% from three-point range on 4 of 16, 76.6% from the free throw line. Maluach played in all 39 games, started all 39 games this season for the Blue Devils, averaging over 21 points per contest. Great games for him in the NCAA tournament when you look at a 14.9 rebound, 2 block game versus Alabama in the Elite Eight, or his career-high 4 blocks that came against Arizona in the Sweet 16, along with 13.6 rebounds, 17 games in double figures for Maluach offensively throughout the season. But speaking a little bit more on the defensive end of the floor for man, I mean, his ability just to alter shots is something I think that'll be able to carry over to the next level.
Well, I think that's the biggest plus for him going to the NBA and still as a projected top 10 pick is his defensive ability. And one thing we haven't mentioned is that he hasn't played basketball for a very long time. He's still very new to the sport compared to his counterparts in college and obviously some other guys who are going to be picked in the top 10. He has played the least amount of basketball in his career. And I think that's something that also could be appealing to NBA teams because you have the ability to mold him and continue to develop him. But obviously his defense right now is way ahead of his offense, at least where it projects to the next level, because he's 7'2", because he has close to a 10-foot wingspan and standing reach and that good stuff. So he could make an immediate impact immediately at the next level in the NBA, wherever he gets picked in June's draft.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all if we see him making headlines already in his rookie season at the next level. All right, we'll go ahead and we'll take our first break here on today's show and continue our Khaman Maluach discussion here in just a moment when Locked On Blue Devils continues. Locked On Blue Devils here today is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have even more ways than ever before to play smart and win big. We look at tonight's action in the NBA over at FanDuel. Game 5s between the Knicks and the Celtics. Then we've also got Game 5 between the Warriors and the Timberwolves. Our heart certainly is broken for Jason Tatum, our Duke star, who with the Boston Celtics the other night suffered a torn Achilles, has already undergone a successful surgery. Prayers up to him and a speedy recovery for JT. Meanwhile, Boston on the floor tonight. They are favored by 4.5 points over the Knicks in Game 5 with our friends over at FanDuel. And then a little bit later tonight, Game 5, the Minnesota Timberwolves back at home trying to close out the Warriors. FanDuel has the T-Wolves favored by 10.5 points. A lot of cool player odds for you to get involved in as well. Are you new to FanDuel? Well, now's the perfect time to sign up. Go ahead right now. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA and a proud sponsor of Locked On Blue Devils. All right, let's keep this thing going. Kevin Connelly's here with us from Ball Durham. We're talking about Duke basketball as we're talking about the year that Khaman Maluach was able to have for Duke this season. As we've done with these other player review shows, Kevin, what are some of the top moments, the top plays, the top things that we remember from this season with Khaman Maluach? Let's just say something, unfortunately, we'll remember him for was that crazy, wild game against NC State that felt like it had a little bit of everything, including Maluach losing a little bit of his lunch there in the live action, man. I don't know. I don't want to see something like that again, man, but glad to see it was okay.
Yeah, that was, I think that was a first.
Yes.
For everybody, and maybe even the history of Cameron Indoor Stadium. So
yeah.
A fun story because it had a happy ending. Kind of the one game, I guess, that always will stick out to me a little bit is what he did against Alabama in the Elite Eight. You mentioned it a little bit earlier on in the show. I think that was his best game he's played for Duke. I know you mentioned the 19-point game against Notre Dame. He had another really impressive game against Stanford around February, I believe. But that game against Alabama, just given the stakes and given that a trip to the Final Four is on the line, I think how he was able to control the game defensively, what he was able to do offensively, how he lived above the rim, I think that was his best game in a Duke uniform. And
matchup specifically with that game, right? I mean, you look at that front court for Alabama, that's a big squad. Obviously, they're known for their guards and the three-point shots that they get up because, boy, does Alabama take a million three-pointers. But the reason they're able to do that is they've got these monsters on the inside that can clean up the glass and make an impact in the post as well.
Yeah, 100%. And if you remember, Alabama had just set an NCAA tournament record for most three-pointers in a game, the previous game in the Sweet 16 against BYU. So
good point.
Also, that came into a factor, and they weren't really hitting their three-pointers against Duke, so they tried to go to the rim a little bit more often than they usually do, and Maluach was there, recorded 2 blocks in the game. That was coming after 4 blocks against Arizona in the Sweet 16. So I think that weekend he had of the Sweet 16 and the Elite Eight were 2 of his best games as a Duke Blue Devil.
It's good to save it towards the end. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to carry it over into that Final Four game like we talked about against Houston, but still so many other moments for Man on the inside. I mentioned the number a moment ago, but he finished with 81 dunks for the Blue Devils this past season. Obviously, a guy who wanted to live above the rim. Duke finally figured out we can make things easier on ourselves if we just throw it up to the big fella on the interior and let him go get it. And his ability to make plays right there around the rim, Kevin, was so huge.
Yeah, sometimes you would have liked to see that more than you did, but it eventually clicked in for this Duke team just to get it up there because there weren't that many guys that could match not only his size, but then when he was able to jump, his vertical. So, yeah, and we've talked about this, JJ. I think we talked about it right after he declared for the draft. And if you're looking at an immediate pro comparison, I think Dereck Lively is a good match for him early in his NBA career, just because they both have the over 7-foot size. They're both lanky type players that are going to make their waves defensively first in the NBA and then be that lob threat to play above the rim. So I think that's a good comparison for him. Maluach had more of an impact in his freshman season at Duke throughout the year than Lively, who really only came on late. But certainly I think Maluach, with what he showed during his freshman season, that is going to translate to his first season in the NBA.
Yeah, dude, I was looking at Bart Torvik's numbers, T-Rank, online a little bit ago, kind of looking at the dunks in particular, and it's been something that if folks follow me online, they know I love to, as someone who's never dunked before in my life, and that's the one athletic feat I wish that I could say I was able to do and never will be. I'm fascinated by it. Dereck Lively only had 54 dunks in his season playing for the Blue Devils. It was 81 for Khaman Maluach. Mark Williams, by the way, Duke's Final Four year in 2022, Big Mark had 96. So he absolutely lived above the rim. But I thought those dunk numbers were fascinating, kind of looking back at the comparison of Maluach, because it's obviously two guys that he plays well with.
No, 100%. And I think the reason for that is because the floor spacing was so much better for Duke this season. You had shooters. You had guys that could drive. You have Cooper Flagg who can do it all. When you look at that Dereck Lively team, you were kind of playing with two bigs a lot, and Kyle Filipowski and Dereck Lively. So it wasn't as easy to throw it up to a guy like Lively if you had another 7-footer clogging up the paint like with Filipowski.
All right, so we take a look at his next steps for Maluach, and then we'll get to our final break here on the program today. This week, he's participating in Chicago at the NBA Draft Combine. Monday night, he was at the draft lottery, sitting beside Cooper Flagg and Con Knippel. The Blue Devils were right there in the front row, which was awesome to see. We've seen footage of Maluach going through the agility drills with his 7'2" body. Crazy to see him move that quickly. I think that's going to impress a whole lot of people. And he was shooting the ball well, it seemed like, in some of his workouts. What are you seeing? What are you hearing from his combine week so far, Kev?
Well, it's done in terms of everything you're going to see on the court. Kind of like Cooper Flagg, you go through the standard agility and shooting drills that you have to complete at the NBA Combine, but then not going to play in the 5-on-5 scrimmages because, as we've talked about, guys who have promises or who are projected to be top-end lottery picks, they don't play in the 5-on-5 scrimmages because there's not really much they can accomplish in those games. So for Khaman Maluach, his combine is done. He'll still meet with teams. He'll still go through that whole process. But in terms of on the court, you're not going to see him over the next couple of days out in Chicago. Everything else I'm hearing, I will say the one thing that he really did impress in was his three-point shooting, something that we talked about a little bit earlier on. He has that in his bag, and certainly that is a point of emphasis in the NBA. They need guys who could shoot 1 through 5. But still projected as a top 10 pick right now. I think some people are looking at maybe Brooklyn at 8. Is Toronto a potential for him? New Orleans, somewhere like that. Could they be a real landing spot for Khaman Maluach? One team that I've just heard buzzed around a little bit more than the others is the Toronto Raptors, because they're looking for a quote-unquote cheap option at center who could really solidify their defense at the rim. So that's just one team to keep an eye on going forward here with Khaman Maluach.
Yeah, Toronto would be fun. We talk about Cooper Flagg going to Dallas, and there's already Dereck Lively and Kyrie Irving on the NBA side of things. If Maluach is in Toronto, or if Con Knippel maybe ended up in Toronto, you'd be joined by RJ Barrett and Brandon Ingram. So there's your fair share of Duke flavor for both of those teams. So really excited to see Man keep this thing going. Excited to see what he's going to be able to do as he begins the next steps, and really fired up that we got to see him play a season for Duke basketball. What a year it was for Maluach. All right, we'll take our final break, and then we've got some Cedric Coward stay or go news that we want to touch on right after this. Thank you so much for making Locked On Blue Devils your first listen and your first watch each and every day. For your second listen today, make sure that you go check out The Portal Show. Brian Smith has the latest rumors for Locked On, portal entries, and signings. Be the most informed fan on the rapid changes of the college football landscape. Find The Portal on YouTube or wherever it is that you listen to your podcast. And, of course, make sure that you check out Locked On College Basketball with Isaac Shade and Andy Patton. They do a remarkable job keeping you up to date on everything going on in the sport we all love, with tons of Duke basketball content and coverage. Also, check out Locked On Sports Today if you're looking for our network's rundown of all the biggest stories in sports taking place each and every day. All right, so as we continue to move forward here on today's program, Kevin Connelly's here with me from Ball Durham. We're talking about Duke basketball. It is NBA Combine Week, and a little bit later today, Cedric Coward was able to meet with reporters discussing the looming stay or go, stay in the draft or go on to play basketball for Duke. Here's what Cedric Coward had to say.
100% focused on the draft. Talking to Coach Scheyer and the staff, I think I communicate pretty much everything with them as I gain information. And they're 100% with me on my focus of the draft right now because this is my dream. So at the moment, I'm 100% focused on the draft.
What do you need to hear to stay in the draft?
Honestly, I don't have like a specific thing I need to hear. Obviously, if it's like you're going to be a lottery pick, then yeah, I'm going to leave. But at the end of the day, I don't know if it's something specific I need to hear. I just know it's a conversation with my agent that will help me decide and, with the best information I have for the best decision for me.
How would Duke help you?
Oh, tremendously. There's a reason I picked them, It kind of sucks because people think like I'm using Duke for, just the noise or whatever it is, or whatever it may be. But I picked them, and I love Coach Scheyer and the staff for a reason. And I believe they can help me if I were to go there. And, you see what they did this year. They got the whole starting lineup in the draft combine. So, I know they'll help me if I go there, too.
How would you describe the strengths of your team right now?
Okay, that was Cedric Coward chatting with Isaac Trotter, one of our good friends on the podcast. Isaac was on the show last week talking about being in Chicago this week for the NBA Draft Combine. And I don't know how I'm such a big fan of Cedric Coward. I already was, but just kind of hearing the maturity already that he's displaying as someone who started off his basketball career, like we said, at the Division III level, but then being able to recognize what Duke would be able to do for him as he goes through this process. All of that said, though, Kevin, it feels like maybe he's not going to end up playing for Duke after all. What did you make of his comments here?
So I thought it was impressive. I agree with you on that. I think he's very mature, and it shows that he's not stringing Duke along. It's not like he said people think he's just using Duke for the expanded exposure, and that's not the case. So everything that we've heard, even before these prospects arrived in Chicago, his pre-draft workouts were impressive.
Yeah.
And then as soon as he gets there on Monday, he goes through the measurements and he measures out in kind of that elite tier of prospects. And then you see him, he was leading one of the drills of all players at the combine in 3-point shooting. Everything is geared up towards him staying in the draft and potentially being a first-round pick. So I think that's the way it is trending right now. But certainly it's kind of unfortunate because I feel like a lot of people who are fans of Duke and follow Duke were a little bit skeptical when he committed. You're getting a guy from Washington State who only played 6 games. Before that, he was at Eastern Washington, and he started his career at the D3 level. Like what's going on here? Like, why are you not getting that big name? But, I mean, Jon Scheyer kind of was the first of all these people to recognize the talent that he has, and now just unfortunate that everybody else
whole world,
in the NBA is recognizing that talent, and he's still one of the fastest risers up this NBA draft board. So I have a feeling we're going to get a decision sooner rather than later on whether Cedric Coward is going to stay in the NBA draft or withdraw and come back to Duke. I know we talked about the deadline is May 28th in order to keep your NCAA eligibility. And I know Duke fans have known to go right up to the deadline with that withdrawal date. But I don't think that's going to be the case this year. I think you're going to know probably pretty soon whether or not Cedric Coward is going to stay in the draft or withdraw. But like I said, everyone right now is expecting him to remain in the draft.
All right, so let's mark our calendars. And as you said, once again, May 28th, it's May 14th. 2 weeks from today is the deadline. So we'll see how quickly Cedric Coward makes a decision and whether or not that decision is for him to come play basketball for Duke next season. Kevin, always good chatting with you here. We're going to have a whole lot more conversations, you and I, on tomorrow's show about Cedric Coward and this looming decision. Where can people find your work and support you?
Well, go read us at balldurham.com. We're all over Cedric Coward's decision and what could potentially be coming up next for this Duke basketball team.
We'll talk again soon, Kevin. See ya.
Thanks, JJ.
All right, that's Kevin Connelly joining us here on today's episode of Locked On Blue Devils. Thank you to everybody for watching each and every day, for listening to our podcast. Leave us a 5-star rating and written review. Go ahead and like this video on YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and follow us on X at @LO_Blue Devils. As always, go Duke. I'll talk to you again tomorrow. My name is JJ Jackson. Thank you and good day.